all I could say is that maybe if it's even a fraction of how much joy and inspiration, and that's probably the best way to describe it, all of which it has brought to me in my life, and the sort of strange obsession that I have or have had with painting and being an artist and or obsessed painter. Hi everyone. In the history of painting, Marc Chagall could be seated comfortably at the epicenter of the entire spectrum of painting. From the depiction of historical, figurative, emotional, from the depiction of stories, naturalism, sceneries, landscapes, with flamboyant expression and colors, or abstracted ideas, or abstract or abstracted ideas, abstract or abstracted ideas and compositions or depictions. Chagall could basically attack any of those subjects equally proficiently or confidently. And he could assert all those different things, mythological, imaginative, storytelling, portraiture, confident depiction of the human figure and the natural environment and setting of people and animals and nature. And though he should be rightly credited, he maybe should also not achieve or be accredited entirely on his own, because he is, like all great artists, a product of his environment and his history, all these different things, sort of external things that can contribute to the the formation of a prolific artist or creator, be it in any field whatsoever. And I'm not sure if there's anyone quite comparable or ever will be to Chagall, just for a sort of maybe futile comparison, but I think he could be seen as the greatest artist since Michelangelo. But that's not meant to add more accolades to Michelangelo. It's just that Michelangelo, as a painter, had certain strengths and maybe certain areas of weakness if compared with, and I don't think weakness is a great way to say it, but certain pros and cons. So it's not to overly esteem Michelangelo, but Michelangelo is perhaps the greatest painter in history. Maybe with the exception of Da Vinci, maybe with the exception of Van Gogh, for slightly different reasons. And we can't forget Picasso. Who I've often stated was the greatest painter. And I've rivaled him with Miro as the greatest painter more recently. But I think I could rival both with Chagall. And these are probably all futile comparisons, but I guess it's all of this is just, I'm saying all this just as a sort of lead up to framing Chagall in a certain way. And that basically Chagall can, and here comes the great basically, which just seems to be the crux of all my lectures. Then there's Gauguin, which I almost forgot. I recently sort of thought of Gauguin this way. So, you know, it's maybe just where I'm at right now, kind of like re-analyzing art history. And so it's just like, you know, Picasso was the greatest artist, in my opinion, 25 years ago and 5 years ago. And in the last 2 years, it's been Miro and Peter Doig, probably. And last year, it was spontaneously Gauguin. Yesterday, it was Van Gogh, who's been seated there probably at least thrice prominently in the course of my life. But Chagall is incomparable. He just had such a free and fluid and potent, perhaps poignant, not exactly my favorite word, but it seems to have become handy lately. Chagall could just so freely paint anything on a human scale. and just kind of so simply in a way, so tenderly, so joyously, so humorously, or delightfully. Um, yeah, humor, um, playfully. What else? Humor is, I might have to go back onto that. It's the sensibility. I'm thinking of the sort of the wittiness. I guess I'm sort of trying to find another description, but the wittiness is just is amazing. Uh, but there's another kind of humor that is the sensibility is is just so delightful in Chagall. And I guess the whole point of what I'm attempting to convey is that Chagall, just to interrupt that for a second, Picasso broke open the Picasso broke down the walls um, of what needs to be accomplished for the artist. Um, Van Gogh may have been just as luminous, a bright light as the glow coming out of the night cafe or a starry night, like a pioneer who was a revolutionary figure walking into the field of modern art, and yet stands almost uniquely alone. But Picasso smashed down the walls of the existing status quo. Picasso was definitely a lot more of a persona than Van Gogh. And Chagall as well, probably like Van Gogh, was a far more subdued persona. But Chagall opens the doors for all creativity and all artists in the universe to do anything that they want confidently, simply, plainly. He just accomplishes or accomplished everything with a certain kind of grace. And so I think you could say that's kind of like the hand of God, bringing out those abilities and that greatness. But that greatness is something for all of us, and it blesses all of us. So maybe that does tie back into what Michelangelo accomplished. Michelangelo was arguably a man of the people, and it's taken me probably many years to appreciate his significance as a kind of spiritual figure, perhaps only like following my own rededication of faith or whatever, but maybe it was just a sort of natural inclination or direction of my life as I basically find appreciation in more and more artists constantly as I go, and I also research or discover or reinvent artists that I had not done so before or previously. But I think that maybe there's sort of a big gap there in a way. There's a big space between Michelangelo and Marc Chagall. There is nearly 500 years. And in that way, Michelangelo kind of seems like the first truly great master and is followed by Chagall. And again, in this way, Chagall could be considered a man of the people because of like Michelangelo, I think the spirituality of his art, but in a different way, his liberation of art. For anyone that would take the time to just enjoy and appreciate his art, I think the benefit will be profoundly moving for their own personal creative inspiration. I'm just thinking how there's probably a lot of people that might not be impacted that way, that might have their own creative impulses and inspirations, but I think there's probably a lot of people like me that kind of didn't really grasp the history of painting until I saw other painters do it. I knew about art on some different conventional levels, and I knew about it in many specific individual experiential dimensions. For example, I was acquainted with the graphic arts, and I was acquainted with cartooning, and I was acquainted with traditional painting on a sort of general scope, probably common to most people. But that's kind of it, other than the fact that I was also always painting drawing myself. I actually would say drawing and making art, and kind of not even realizing that I wasn't a painter. I just never really thought of it. I just thought drawing was art in a way. So, and I think that's kind of a North American thing too, in that the history of painting has a very different presence I think, in Europe than in North America. And I think for me, it took seeing some of these people, because it was really only maybe Van Gogh and a bit of Da Vinci that I had looked at with any level of extensiveness. Maybe a Michelangelo, maybe a couple of the Impressionists. I just can't really think of many others. Maybe some MC Escher, who seems to be kind of like a colossal figure in the sort of introductory world of art and painting history. But there were certain painters that opened the doors for me to experience painting in a very profound way. And that came with the art history learning and study of the artists, and then sort of became an epiphany when I began to study the modern artists. And so Van Gogh was probably the only exception where an art historical figure had made a prominent impact in my life until I formally started studying art. And then it took a while before I really, I think, experienced some sort of profound impact. It was like all of a sudden, it was once we began to study the artists at the turn of the century, at the turn of the 20th century in modern art history, all of a sudden things started to grab me. And then very quickly, within the next year of university, I went from basically just sort of twiddling my thumbs to a fanatic. And within the following year of that, I was just completely engorged in art throughout all of art history. So on that note, maybe, and just closing, is that just in that whole array, that whole gamut, all of a sudden it's just like Chagall is just like he can do it all. Like he can do it all really well and gracefully. So it's kind of like, and simply in a way where we can all create like that. We maybe will never come close to Chagall's output, or you might say achievements, whatever. But we can all enjoy the creative process, and we can all confidently produce spectacular art and arguably volumes of art and creative output and inspiring, joyful, artistic creativity. So yeah, I'd just like to sort of inspire you and bless you with that. All I could say is that maybe if it's even a fraction of how much joy and inspiration, and that's probably the best way to describe it, all of which it has brought to me in my life, and the sort of strange obsession that I have or have had with painting and being an artist and or obsessed painter.